Hello, everyone. My name is Rob Gallipo. I'm going to be talking to you about a company called Melansons, which is a sheet metal fabrication and weld shop. It's quite profitable these days, and people go there. They love working there and turnaround rate's low. It's your ideal company. This company is managed by Joel Donaldson. Joel started out at Melansons in 2004 on the SAW, and he worked his way up to shipping and receiving, which gave him quite an insight, an advantage, if you will, by knowing the customers, uh, knowing all the vendors that they deal with, and kind of gives you an oversight of how things are run in a company. Now, up to about 3 years ago, Melanson's was pretty good, but prior to 3 years, the doors appeared like they were going to be closing. Profits were way down, employees were angry, and they had gone through total of three managers prior to Joe. And then when after the last guy left, there's tragedy in his family and he couldn't handle both. Joe applied and said that he could do it. And they gave him a shot. They hired him, and they haven't been disappointed yet. And I wanted to know why Joe did that, why he took on a job that seemed to be doomed from the beginning. He was set up to fail. And I want to know how he's able to take angry employees and turn them around, motivate them, make them want to work there. Turnaround rate is almost, I'd say, close to zero because they've been able to keep their talent, and how he got the customers to have trust in Melancons again. So I wanted to know how he did it. So I asked Joe if he would mind being interviewed, and he was very happy. The first question I asked Joe is, what made you think you were the leadership that this place needed to turn around? And Joe said he had witnessed everything that was wrong with the leadership prior to him. The first manager had been there since 1940 something to up to a few years, no, up to about 10 years ago. It was very authoritarian, and he would rub people the wrong way. He would scream and yell, get the job done. Don't care how you do it. Get it done out the door to the customer. And there was a lot of turnaround rate then, and it was hard for them to keep skilled employees. And this one after that guy was he communicated a lot with the customers, but failed to communicate with the employees, and that caused a lot of problems because he made promises to the employees. So yes, you can get your product by this time, and yes, we can build that product, and so on from there, and it caused a lot of problems with the employees and the customers. The employees were angry that they're being voluntold to work all this extra overtime to get this product done. They'd be stepped on when they try to do other people's products, and the customers would be angry if they didn't get their products in time as promised. So there's a lot of bad communication going on there. And then the other guy I told you about that couldn't do both because of the tragedy in his family. Now you have Joe. So I asked Joe what problems did he see with the management prior to him, and he said that there was a big lack of communication, especially between what had to be done, how it was going to be done, the timeline to be done between the employees and what the customers expected. And so that was one of the first things he said he had to correct. He decided to be a participative type leader and listen to what the employees had to say. So that was the first thing that he did was have a big meeting with the entire plant to explain that he's going to listen. He's going to take what they had to say and implement it to make a better working environment. And he said there was a lot of ideas, endless ideas of how they could do better. And so the first thing Joe wanted to do was fix the plan itself before he started to convince customers, which makes absolute sense. You can't promise something that you don't know is there yet or not. Um, so he started listening to them, to the employees, and it seemed like everybody was banging against each other. So he decided that he was going to make departments. Where people, the lesser skilled people, had dedicated stations. Like they had the shear guy, the CNC punch operator, the saw operator, all these people, that was their job. And when they finished what they had, then they could work with the more skilled workers and learn more. And he said that's how he just started. Things started to run more smoothly. He was able to streamline the plant instead of a bunch of fabricators running around, some knowing exactly what they got to do, others aren't skilled enough and haven't been taught because the skilled operators are too busy trying to take their job start to finish. So instead of foremen, he just put leads. He has master fabricators that take a project, divvy it up, and send it to everybody else. To send the shear stuff to the shear guy, the stuff that had to be sawn, give them an order, and so on, and then it all comes back together to the main fabricator guy who would get work assistance from the lesser skilled individuals when they were done doing all the orders for the day or the week, what have you. And this seemed to work out very well. Employees started feeling needed. They were getting the support that they needed. The customers were happy. They were getting their products on time. And so Joe just continuously succeeded doing this. He was able to keep skilled people. He was able to train them, train the not so skilled people, and it was just a perfect system. Um, Even when the customers wanted to know deadlines, and Joe didn't want to tell the customer something false, so he would put them in contact, communicating with the master fabricators that could give the customers an accurate timeline. And it was just everybody was happy. It totally turned the whole plan around. I asked Joe about expectations. What were the expectations that his employees had of him, and what were his expectations of the employees? Joe said that during that meeting that they had, the very first one, the employees' expectations for him were communication. They wanted to know what was going on, what the customers were demanding, when the deadlines were. And he said his expectations of the employees was simply give it 110%. And that's about as straightforward as you can get. I asked Joe if he ever changes his leadership style. I mean, does he ever go from the democratic communication to authoritarian communication if things seem to be getting bound up, and or if he has a new employee that doesn't know much? And Joe said no, he stays democratic the entire time. He says when you get a new guy in, you have someone train him on a machine and just keep him there for a while. When you think he has that down pat, you start moving him around. But he says, as far as he does not want to do authoritarian because the first manager put such a bad taste in his mouth, he decided he would never manage like that. And lastly, I decided to ask Joe how he deals with conflict. Because to me, as a supervisor myself, dealing with conflict can be one of the most headache part of the job, especially when you got two people at each other, someone's angry with what you've done, or you got a customer that's angry. And I asked him how he handles that, and he says he just stays involved. He says that he'll hear both sides of the story, and he kind of acts as a mediator between the two. He doesn't take either side, but he works with them to work it out. And he says, so I asked him, what about customers? How do you do a conflict with customers? And he said that the biggest conflict with customers is they want their product now. And they don't care that you have three or four customers in front of them. They think they're the biggest one that Lansens may have. So they think they go to the front of the line. And Joe says if it's doable, he'll get their product out quickly. But most of the time, when it's just seemingly impossible to get the product as fast as they want it, he'll stand his ground. He'll back up his employees and tell the customer that it's just not. He's not going to ask his employees to work double shifts just to get their product out. He understands that customer relationships are important, but that's kind of what ruined it for the second manager prior to him, making these promises and just hoping that it's going to go through. All right, to sum up what I discussed with Joe in this whole video here, was Joe Donaldson was a guy who took on a seemingly impossible leadership task. The leadership position seemed to be set up to fail from the get-go. And Joe felt he could handle it because he saw what was wrong with the leadership prior to him stepping on board. Communication, there was a lack of it. And he knew that being an effective leader, you had to communicate and communicate well with your followers, your customer, all the stakeholders involved. And he did that very well, and it motivated people. And Joe, one thing I forgot to mention earlier was Joe, he had to come up with some sort of initiative in the beginning because people were untrustworthy. So he told his employees that if they can meet their goals, if they can become more productive, more streamlined, and make customers happy and get customers back, the initiative he offered was a raise across the board for everybody, but everybody had to put in 110%. And that it worked. It cost the company per employee $1 an hour extra on top of what they already made. And that's not bad. That's 40 extra bucks in everybody's paycheck, and that did the trick. And not the entire trick, but it helped motivate him. And then once he streamlined the shop and he figured out where people should be, who to put in charge, the leads, he never gave anybody the title of foreman, but he made the master fabricators leads. They took on everything, the jobs, and knew how to divvy it up or delegate. The saw guys would take care of that part of the job, and the shear guys take care of that. They give it to formers, or they would form the metal and they put it all together. And he trained the lesser skilled people by placing them with the skilled people. So it all worked out well. The customers, you gain their trust, and it's very profitable business now, which is a far cry from the doors almost closing. And I ended the conversation with Joe as, is there anything more that you think you need to do to continue to improve on Melanson? And he said he doesn't see anything past communication. He said as he communicates with his customers and communicates with his employees, then he might get more insight on what more they could do different. He said, but right now, streamlining the shop and the communication is working very, very well. I also have asked Joe if there was any incentive for him to bring this company back around from the owners of the company. And he said no. He said the owners of the company didn't offer him anything because they pretty much expected that it was a done deal. He was just going to fill a void till the company closed the doors. But the company's doing very well now. The owners are happy. And Joe has gotten a raise in the last couple of years because he was so successful at doing what they thought themselves, the owners, was an undoable task. That concludes my video of Joel Donaldson as a man I thought was an excellent leader. He brought a company back from the dead, and life is grand for him now. Thank you.